Yo, welcome into another episode of Capturing the Game. It's the Game Within the Game podcast featuring me, your host, Desmond Jones. Today I'm flying solo. Juwan Poloman Stewart is not available to make it today. He's dealing with some IT work, but that's okay. We're still going to rock out today with another fantastic episode. Before we get into things, we want to remind the audience that Capturing the Game is sponsored by Capture Sports Agency, where the CEO and founder is Shanta Smith-Jones. Beats are produced by Jordan McClung. His information will be in the bio. Now that we got the introductions, most of that stuff out the way, let's get into the guests. Today, I present to you the writer at Sports Illustrated. His name is Wilton C. Jackson. Wilton, how are you doing today, man?
I'm doing pretty good, Desmond. I'm glad you brought me on, man.
Oh yeah, man, no problem, man. Thank you for. It's always dope to get a chance to interview people, especially people that look like me.
Oh, absolutely. Totally understand that.
So but yeah, man. So go ahead and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and let's get it started.
Yeah, man. So my name's Wilton Jackson. I'm originally born and raised in Jackson, Mississippi. Went to undergrad at the University of Southern Mississippi. After that, I did a program called the Sports Journalism Institute, and I was placed at an internship at ESPN. Following that internship, I then went off to graduate school at LSU. I thought it was going to be a normal 2-year program, but it ended up being a little longer. Had a couple of detours, so instead of graduating in the normal 2 years, I ended up taking a job at WSB TV on their digital team for about a year, probably a year and a half, and then that job ended. Then I had to move back home and finish my master's degree, and I was actually getting a master of mass communication from LSU. Finished that degree in May of 19, and then I ended up getting my first job in my hometown at this newspaper called the Clarion Ledger. And so I wasn't in sports yet. I was doing news. And so what started off as trending news, that meant, you were going to do breaking news every day. You may deal with some investigations, some features. And then, oh, by the way, they knew I had an interest in sports, and they were saying like, hey, we're going to throw you into doing some smaller sports. So I started off doing some sports centered around my undergrad institution at Southern Miss. Then I dabbled into Jackson State. Then before you know it, like I was doing some high school stuff. And by the time I left the Clarion Ledger, I was doing some of everything. And so after that job ended, I ended up moving on to Sports Illustrated in November of 2020.
Let's unpack this. So let's go ahead and talk about it. So why did you want to go back and get your master's? What made you want to pursue that?
So it's interesting that you asked that question, because I actually, when I look at it, when I look back now, when I applied for graduate school, that wasn't the initial plan. Once I graduated from undergrad, I said, I'm ready to go to work. And once I went off to ESPN, I had that experience, and I said, okay, do I still want to be on TV? Because I got my undergraduate degree in broadcast journalism. And so, but once you come out in broadcast, you're thinking like, do I really want to go and be the typical, everyday sports reporter, what that's going to look like? But then because during my years when I was in undergrad, I was also writing for the school paper, interning, freelancing, did some radio work, as well as doing TV work. And I found that I had an interest in doing it all. And so I'm glad that I kind of had that in-between period of once I left ESPN and started graduate school, that I wanted to do some other things beyond just be a face on the TV. Not to knock that anyway, because there's some great, television sports reporters. But for me, I wanted to be able to kind of combine my skills and do it all. And so from there, I said to myself, this backup plan, because graduate school was supposed to be a backup plan. I said, you know what, I'm going to go to graduate school for free. It was paid for. So I said, let me go ahead and get this master's degree. And then once I get out, I can make myself a little bit more marketable. I have some other additional internships and experiences. And I'll see where I land after that.
Yeah, I feel so. I went back and get my master's through my company that I work for, and they was paying for everything. So I was like, why not? So right. I wanted to make myself more marketable as well, and also trying to move up the ranks. But I was curious to see, because some people don't go back and get a master's just because everything is everything is based entrepreneurship based, and people doesn't really value education as much, especially us. We don't really value education as highly. So I'm just curious.
For sure. And like I said, and you're absolutely right with that. And I just think at that time, for me, it was like Do I take a really small job in a really small place, which eventually I was going to do that anyway. After I graduated from, from LSU
Mhm.
to get my master's, I started off at the Clear and Ledger. It's not the smallest paper, but it's actually the largest paper in the state of Mississippi. But in the grand scheme of things, when you're talking about the media and the way that we look at the media, it's a small paper. But I was just thinking to myself, if I can just build myself up a little bit more, get this additional degree while also building my experiences and my skill set, I think I would be a little bit more prepared as I get ready to go into the industry.
Facts. Super facts. Um, Tell me about your first TV experience. Like what was the routine like going through and preparing to get on TV and stuff?
Yeah, so that experience, I go all the way back to undergrad. And I
Yeah.
remember thinking to myself, like, okay, when I sat in the chair to sit in front of the camera and the camera operator, I'm thinking to myself, like, I have to read from this prompter and I can't mess up. Like, this is real. Like, this is not like take one, take two, take three. This is like when
Yeah.
you start, you start. You don't get a chance to redo it. So of course, like any other person that first starts in TV, you're gonna mess up. That whole saying of when the lights come on, when the lights get hot, that's when things get real, and that's so true.
Hmm.
You're sitting in the seat and you're thinking like, okay, I'm looking over my script. Looking over your script before those lights come on, it's a totally different story from when the lights come on and you're looking at the teleprompter. And so after I got past the idea of having to read from the teleprompter, it was easy. I got a chance to really kind of understand the flow of things. Just because it's written in a teleprompter doesn't necessarily mean that you read it exactly how it comes. In
Hmm.
television news, I had to realize watching, other anchors and reporters, there's, pauses, inflections that you have to make with your voice so that, to make sure that viewers can understand and really kind of get a feel for who you are and as well as you're delivering the news. Like one thing that I learned when I was at my job at WSB, I got this piece of advice from longtime TV anchor Fred Blankenship. He's amazing. Like he's probably one of the best anchors I've had the privilege just to work around in my lifetime. He said, you know what? The one thing that always helped me when I was getting ready to, go on air as a young reporter and a young anchor is that I always envisioned myself talking to my dad. And he did that.
Mm.
And when he told me that, in my 24-year-old mind, I'm thinking to myself, well, yeah, I talk to my dad all the time on the phone or on FaceTime. But to envision that you're looking at a teleprompter and envisioning that it's your dad, like that's a different story. But after I kind of meditated on it and thought about it a little bit more, and I like the way that he delivers the news. I mean, it's so cool, calm, and collected. Like he's never rattled at anything, and he's creative with everything that he does. And so to be able to have that kind of talent, but knowing that deep down inside, you may be getting ready to deliver the worst breaking news story alive, the worst breaking news
Hmm.
story in history. But to keep that calmness and composure to deliver it as if you're having a conversation. Hey, Dad, the I-85 bridge just collapsed in Atlanta. Reporters are saying, or authorities are saying 35 cars were damaged in the collapse, and saying it with a coolness and a calmness, even though it's a very tragic situation. But
Yeah.
he was able to do that, and I said, thinking to myself, to be able to better prepare myself to be on camera and understand how the TV industry works, there has to be some type of calmness and composure, and I think it kind of goes with the idea of really understanding the information, but B, understanding the audience and C, just finding that feel of what makes you comfortable. And I think over the
Mm.
years, and I'm still doing it now, like what I thought was very comfortable at 22, 23 is a little bit different at almost 30. And so
Yeah.
again, the more reps you do, the easier it becomes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. With this, shoot, I don't know what episode this would be by the time this one airs, but like each time, it gets a little bit easier. Like I'm still trying to figure out the whole, like when you're talking, you put emphasis on certain words and just that diction. Like I'm still trying to figure that out. I had to do like a TV shoot for my school, and they was like, yeah, this, read it like this. I was like, all right, hold up. I tried to read it.
Yep, for sure. You have to do it. And like, and when you're first learning, you're thinking to yourself, like, okay, why can I not just read it like this? Why can I not read it normal? But then when you go back and really take in the advice that the people, that mentors give you and you apply it to what you're seeing in the news, it all makes sense. It makes
Oh
perfect
yeah.
sense.
Oh yeah, it does. So I'm still working on that. I'm a work in progress at all times.
Oh no, for sure, for sure.
Was sports always like the end goal for you?
Yeah, so I always wanted to be in sports. I actually grew up playing sports. So I grew up
Okay.
obviously liking basketball, liked football, played some t-ball and baseball when I was really, really younger. But I
Hmm.
obviously gravitated a little bit more to basketball and football and actually played basketball. One of my favorite players growing up, it's probably very cliche, is Allen Iverson. I wanted to be just like this guy. When I say just like him, like the headband, I didn't have braids or an afro.
Yeah.
But I had the headband, the finger bands, the wristbands, his shoes. Like I wanted to be just like this guy because I'm not much of a big guy. Allen Iverson's not a big guy either. You're talking about somebody who's listed at 6 feet, 165 pounds. I mean, maybe 165, but I still don't think he's 6 feet to this day.
Probably
Uh,
not.
nah, but that's the guy I wanted to be like. And so from there, growing up watching the sports, and so oftentimes when I was a kid, I didn't always know what I was fully reading at the time when I was reading the paper, but I would look at all the different stats or like the records for different sports. Like, so the records for
Hmm.
NFL teams, the records for college teams, when they used to, still put them in the paper, which was many years ago. Looking at baseball teams, looking at certain players that played on teams, and it always interested me. And so between that and then also, of course, growing up watching Stuart Scott on SportsCenter, I mean, that was classic. That was your I'm eating breakfast in the morning, a bowl of cereal cut on SportsCenter, and you see this face that like you said, that looks like you, that relates to you, and you're just excited. You're thinking like, man, he just said that clip, he said that highlight with so much energy. It may not have been a whole bunch in the actual highlight, but the way he delivered it, it just changed the way that you thought about it. And so looking at people like him, and obviously and just enjoying sports in general just really like made my whole idea of actually wanting to go into sports journalism that much more. Because coming out of high school, it was going to be two things. It was going to be either sports journalism or sports medicine. So I was going to be a sports therapist or a sports
Mm.
journalist. And so when I realized, I said, do I really like the idea of being around athletes to try to help them get back to their normal ways, maybe after injury? I said,
Hmm.
I like it, but I don't know if that's what I'm really passionate about. And so then when I got to college, I said, you know what, I'm gonna give this journalism thing a try. And that's what I did. And since then I dedicated myself to the craft. Like even starting off in undergrad, I didn't start off in sports. I started off in news, doing like, general news assignments, some feature stories, and then got into sports. And then before I graduated, of course, I was doing news, sports, features, you name it, just a little bit of everything.
Yeah. That's dope. So, okay, so how did you end up as Sports Illustrated? So I know you took a couple of different. Like I was looking up when I went through your LinkedIn profile. I'm like, yo, this man has done everything from consulting, a teacher, starting up a digital program, working at X, Y, Z places. Like, how did you end up at Sports Illustrated?
So I mean, I'll give you. It's for me. I always look at it and say it's a whirlwind of different experiences. Some L's. Some people will look
Yeah.
at my timeline or my LinkedIn page and say, "Man, he's done a lot." But in between those different jobs, small jobs, big jobs, there were some hard L's and lessons that I had to learn. So after college, really the real hard lessons, I think I would say, started after I came back from ESPN, which was this would have been fall of 15, the same semester that I started grad school. And so from there, I was starting grad school when I really didn't want to start it. Because like I said, graduate school was a backup plan. In between that, I was also I was on the national board I was the national board student representative for the National Association for Black Journalists. So I was doing that. I was in my first semester of graduate school, which if you know this because you're in grad school. Graduate school work is way different from undergrad. So I was
Facts.
the student representative. I was taking classes. I had a graduate assistantship in the Office of Diversity at LSU. I was also working in like other little small blogs to still, keep my writing crisp for sports. And then I was also still looking for other opportunities in Baton Rouge to tell stories about, that was going on in the Baton Rouge area. I didn't
Mhm.
really start having some success in terms of getting opportunities in the Baton Rouge area until like my second semester. So we're talking like now, spring 16 going into summer 16. All
Mhm.
while still planning stuff for NABJ conventions, still having a job with my assistantship, and thinking like, okay, I've been to a place like ESPN. I know what they're looking for. Obviously, I'm not prepared. I'm not the hey, the best thing since sliced bread, but at the same time, I know what they're looking for based off some of the critiques that people gave me while I was there. And I would think to myself, okay, how is this graduate assistantship alone going to help me get to where I want to get to? So in my mind, I had already told myself, Wilton, you thought you were grinding in undergrad, like this is gonna have to go to like a whole new level, but the classes are harder. Like graduate school courses are way harder. I don't care what school you go to, like they're just, it takes so much more energy and effort out of you. So of course, a lot of long nights, a lot of days where I thought to myself, am I going to get out of these classes? Am I going to pass? Based off trying to still get experiences, still trying to, keep myself together as far as from a life standpoint, not like, hey, I have everything together in my career, just in life in general. And so from there, when I found out that I wasn't going to graduate at my correct time, so I started in the fall of 15. I was supposed to graduate in the spring of 17. So get this, I was done with all of my coursework. Everything was fine. My GPA was above a 3.5. Everything was great. Only thing I had to do to graduate was finish this professional project, because I elected to do that. You could do a professional project, you could do a thesis, or you could take a comprehensive exam. So I elected to do the professional project, thinking that would be more of an easier route. So in that final semester, what I thought was, yeah, I can get through this professional project in a semester, when in reality, it's like, you're not going to get through it in this final semester. And I'm thinking like, well, if I don't get through it, that means I have to stay additional time. And what does that look like after that? I never forget, March 27, March 28, 2017 were 2 days that literally changed my entire life. And it was because I had never experienced not accomplishing something when it was supposed to happen. Through undergrad, everything was like, okay, if I put my mind to it, if I have a certain deadline, this is going to happen. Like, I know that I have to meet this deadline. I thought that I was getting ready to meet the deadlines to graduate. Didn't work like that. So when my professor, who so happens to be at that time, would have been, she was the actual chair of the department for mass comm, for the graduate students. She was actually she was the chair for my project. And so I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I can, like, as some people would say, skate through this or whatever, like get through this professional project. Like, she was not having it at all. And she was like, yeah, you could just, stay another semester and just get it done. I'm thinking to myself, stay another semester? Like, what are you saying? Like, I'm ready to
see my face. Like, I'm already new.
Yeah, I'm like, I'm ready to go to work. Like, I don't want to stay another semester at LSU. Great school, would never discredit it, but it was just like, I just felt like I had the experiences. I was, I had, made myself better and more marketable to go into the industry. It was time to go, in my opinion. So I say that, and maybe like 2 weeks later, when I was serving on the National Board Student, I was serving as the National Board Student Representative, 2 people had mentioned a job to me. And so it was a part of the Cox Media Group digital talent program. And so I applied for that. And I didn't think I was going to actually get it, but I applied. And so I ended up getting it. And I found out maybe like a week before the 1st of April. And so the lady was like, yeah, we really like you, this, and that. We want to offer you the job. Okay, well, hey, you were going to offer me the job, but I'm still not done with school. So what do I do? Well, you can bring school with you. And then now we're talking about, this is the message from my professors. You can take school with you and you can go ahead and take that job. We encourage you to work. Like, that's really good. It's going to make the department look good. And I'm thinking like, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. So I pack up everything from Baton Rouge. I moved to Atlanta on June 1st, 2017. And I started work on June 6th or 7th. I want to say it was the 7th. I started work. And like the job, very demanding though. One thing about WSB TV in Atlanta, I would arguably say probably the top TV station for breaking news or news in general in the city. You're talking about top 5 market in the country. And you're working with phenomenal reporters, daily anchors, all of that. And so with me working on the digital team there, you're nonstop. When you come in, you jump straight to work. When you leave, it's like, you better get out of there before something else happens. if you get out on time. Because 9 times out of 10, I didn't get out on time. So, and then I wasn't in a place where I was driving myself to work. I would commute to work an hour and a half, to work an hour and a half, from work back home. So that was a whole process within itself. On top of, once I got home, I was kind of trying to save some money by staying with my aunt and uncle and cousin. So you're coming home, you're thinking like, okay, work was already chaotic because breaking news is just chaotic, right? You get home and everybody's asking, well, how's your day? And I'm thinking to myself, my day was extremely chaotic. And you're thinking like, they want to talk for 30 or 45 minutes. Meanwhile, I got a whole professional project that I need to be working on. So I spent so many hours in my aunt and uncle's basement thinking that I was making progress on my project. Only to find out when I sent, I guess it was like one of my first rough edits of what I was working on. Do you know what my professor told me? The chair for my project, you know what she told me? She said, yeah, this is not gonna work. Like, you may need to be, just focusing on school. Focusing on school, that means I won't have a job. Like, I'm a grown man that has, to up until this point has taken care of myself all throughout college, all through, internships and different things like that. To say I need to not be working to finish this project, that's crazy. Like that's insane to me.
That is.
So I think after that, we're talking about, that must have been like October 17. So by the time I get to like January of 18, luckily, when they had gave me some adjustments to make to like my proposal for the project, they were like, okay, now you're on track to, to kind of really start diving into the project. So this is January of 18. I'm thinking to myself, well, is it possible that I can graduate in May of 18? And they were like, well, that depends on you. It just depends on how much you get done. Okay. Well, shortly after maybe February, I found out that my job was about to end because the program was kind of going through some changes. Cox was going through some different changes with the job and the company. So I wasn't going to be able to stay on for the next year because typically that program is 2 years. So I found out that program was only going to be 1 year. So that left me with two situations. Wilton, do you move back to Baton Rouge and really try to work on that project, or do you move back home? Which home was Jackson, Mississippi. And I didn't want to do either, actually. But I said if I was gonna make the choice to do either one, I'd take my chances moving back home. So I moved back home, and I was so ashamed of everything. I felt like I was a failure. I felt like, I'm never gonna get out of school. I lost my job. Like my professors are telling me I can't work and I need to be working because I need money to take care of myself. Not necessarily a lot of money, but just
something.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I'm not depending on my parents or anything like that. That was probably the most humbling experience of my life because nothing that I had ever experienced compared to that. Like, there was nothing I could do that I felt like, this is Wilton, this is what you were doing. No, I had to rely on so many people at that time. And here's the thing, one thing about life, when you're going through crazy times, life itself outside of your problems, it's still rolling. So you're still dealing with like, hey, I need you to do this. Hey, I just need to get some advice from you. And I'm thinking like, I need some advice from you. I need somebody to counsel me because I feel like I'm about to have a nervous breakdown. So anyway, after that, I moved back home. So now we're talking, this is like June or July of 18. So I'm making progress. I get to December and I finally finished. So my project was broken up into like 3 big modules. So basically the project that I did was I created a educational curriculum to teach inner city high school students about mobile and digital journalism. And so pretty cool project. I thought it would be very unique, a way to give back. And, the overall goal long-term would be the more that I continue to go and grow in the industry, depending on different cities that I move to, I could take this and I could use this program and implement it in my hometown in Jackson, but then also implement it into other local inner city schools across the country. That was the goal. But I didn't think about the process that it was going to take to do all of that. And so I remember them, like my committee telling me, they would tell me every day to keep me encouraged. Wilton, you really, at the end of this, you will really have a project that you can truly like bring to schools and this and that. And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, I hear you and I believe you, but at the same time, I'm like, I'm ready to go to work,
Right.
you know? So by the time December rolled around, I thought that I would have been able to finish all 3 parts. By the time December rolled around, I had only finished 1 part. The first module, which had like 9 different parts, and those 9 different parts were broken up into like 7 different parts for each one of those 9 parts. So it was a lot. So 19 rolls around. I said, you know what? I cannot do another semester after this spring. Like I cannot do it. Like if I do it, I'm gonna lose my mind. Like somebody's gonna have to like really check on me because I can't do it. So I got through module 2 because I remember working on module 2 all throughout the holiday season. So by the time January rolled around, it was just a matter of them checking it, reviewing it. And by, I would say, the end of January, they were like, yeah, so you're approved for module 1, module 2. If you can get module 3 done by, let's say, March 12th, you will graduate in May. And I'm thinking to myself, like, that's like 4 weeks. It took me like 6 weeks to get the first module done. They were like, well, yeah, you know, but you can do it. This is the last one, which so happens to be the longest module. So you're talking about night and day, no sleep. Still on top of that, what I also failed to tell you, which stems from the job that I had in Atlanta when I was at WSP. So while there, it was a reporter who her husband worked for this platform, or he owns the platform called HBCU Game Day. So I started doing that in Atlanta, covering smaller HBCUs like Morehouse, Spelman, schools like that, smaller HBCUs, not necessarily small in like the magnitude within the country, but in terms of like sports wise. So I was covering their games and things like that. And so I remember moving home and the guy asked me, he said, well, since you're back in Jackson, would you mind covering Jackson State? And I said, oh, sure. You know, I can do that. You know, I grew up in Jackson. I've been around, Jackson State pretty much all of my life. All of my family went to Jackson State. A good majority of my family went to HBCUs. And so when I would cover those games, man, that was like almost a segue or a break from reality, like a break from, hey, I got to finish this module versus like, oh, I got these pictures of these athletes. I got stories to write. It was just fun for me. And man, when I say like, as I finished module 3, barely by the time it was time for me to have it done, I finished it in like the first week in April. I had to go defend everything in my project. And I never forget my professor, the day I went to go defend, after I had defended, my professor opened that door. She opened it so slow. And I said, either I'm about to pass, if she's about to tell me I passed, or like she was about to tell me you have another semester. When that lady told me that I passed, I think if I asked her to this day, she would probably say I picked her up. She's shorter than me and smaller than me. But I was so excited because you just don't know. Well, you probably know. But for people that have not been to graduate school, all the hoops and like the jumps that they will put you through will make you feel like you are crazy. Crazy. So when she told me that, I was like, in my words, I said, thank you, Jesus. I'm ready to go. Like, I'm ready to like get out of here. Again, no disrespect to LSU, but it's just time to go. I'm ready for that next chapter. Graduated in May of 19. A couple weeks after that, I would say maybe like the end of June, found out I was going to get the job at the Clarion Ledger. So I started off in news there. Started out really well. First day I had a breaking news story and it did really, really well. Never thought that was going to happen a day in my life. Wow. The story got picked up.
The story?
It was about,
story on?
So it was this guy that was like on he had broken in. No. It was like a runaway fugitive or somebody that had broke into something and they were looking for him. And so one of the senior reporters were like, does anybody know anybody that works in like the Meridian Police Department or something like that? And I said, yeah, I know somebody who works there. So I ended up making a couple phone calls, led to some other things. And I said, yeah, I got some information for you, whatever. Started typing the story. The story got picked up like right away from like some other national outlets. I mean, for a first day or even a first week on the job, you would have thought I was a superstar. For me, I was just glad that I was fitting in starting off.
Right.
Because for me, I was working around so many talented reporters that had been in the industry for, on average, at least 15 years. They had been there for a while. One guy had been there his entire career for like 30 years. He knew Jackson in and out. There's nothing that you could tell him that he didn't know, you know? Actually, I grew up reading some of his stories in the Clarion Ledger when I was a kid. That's how I knew. I was like, this guy knows everything.
Yeah.
So after I got acclimated at the Clarion Ledger, I started, I kept doing stories with news. And then, of course, the executive editor knew I wanted to get into sports. Started doing some sports, did some stuff with Southern Miss, which is, my undergrad alma mater. And then I went off into doing some stuff for Jackson State with sports. And then we're talking 2020, I was doing stuff for high school sports because our high school sports reporter had left. COVID had just hit. We left the newsroom. We came home, which is now my reality because I work from home now. And by the time I would say May of June of 2020 rolled around, everybody that was in that newsroom that I knew when I first started either left the Clarion Ledger or took other jobs. Most of them left to go somewhere else because it was just so unstable. So in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, like, how much longer am I going to be able to stay here? So August rolled around, and I remember before August rolled around, I had gotten a call. Actually, somebody had reached out to me through LinkedIn about a potential opportunity with Sports Illustrated. So in my mind, I'm thinking like, well, for sure, I would want to consider something like this, especially knowing that I want to get into sports. So they had reached out, and they knew kind of like my background. They liked the fact that I was diverse in a bunch of things. So they liked the fact that I was diverse with video, that I had done some audio work with podcasts, and the idea that I like to write. So, finding somebody that can do it all in this day and age is like a gold mine. And so I remember having several conversations that probably went over a span of maybe a month and a half. And so after that, I took a risk. And left the Clarion Ledger on August 17th. And I remember the day when I left my laptop with my editor, who was probably the best editor that I could have ever had in my life. We would bump heads a lot though, because I remember her telling me a lot of times she would be like, Wilton, this is trash, for the lack of better words, because she would say some other words. She would go out, come back in. And when I say this is like no judgment or anything like that, but she liked to smoke a lot. And so she would step out, she would have a smoke. She's like, Wilton, come outside a little bit. I'm gonna have a smoke. We're gonna talk a little bit. So I remember a couple of days she would always say, why do you want to do this? She would always ask me, what makes you passionate about what you do? And I told her that I like, telling other people's stories and telling stories that are impactful for people around me. And hopefully I continue to do that throughout the rest of my career. She said, that's a good thing. She said, the biggest thing that you have going for yourself is the fact that you're personable and you're able to interact with people. When you're talking to them, like they can feel your personality and you can pick up on other people's personalities and stuff like that. So she said, now, because you have that asset working for you, now you have to be able to fill it out and show it in your stories. And so she was like, you're already a great writer. You just have to understand how to really make that unfold when it comes to actually writing it out. And for so many times when I first started, when I was submitting my drafts for stories, she would have so many edits for me. I would be like, geez, like, am I even doing this right? Like, is it that bad? And then she would tell me like, this is pretty good. And I would sit at the table beside her, and if she would tap her foot on the ground, and it would be like just a little constant tap. Yeah. And if it ever stopped, that means right there, that she's looking at you like, this is BS. Like, what is this? Like, you need to go back, change that. You need to just get rid of all of this and rearrange it. I was just like, oh my gosh. But I could have not appreciated her so much after I left the Clarion Ledger, because she really made me a much better writer. Probably to this day, probably one of the best editors I ever had. And when I turned in my laptop to her on my last day, she said, you're going to go places as long as you keep the faith in what you believe in and continue to want to put in the work to get better, you'll go far. So I was without a job for maybe about a month maybe about a month and a half. So then I started at Sports Illustrated on November 1st of 2020. So I know that's a long-winded story.
No. Look, on Capture the Game, we appreciate your story, whether it's short, long, it doesn't matter, because it's your platform for you to tell your story, for you to tell how everything happened, in your journey. So we encourage people to, tell their answers full and entirety. You don't short corners, because there ain't no short corners in life. So
right.
But so I'm curious, because one of the things I kind of want to do like and sometime in the future is like do a little bit of writing and stuff. So as your editor, what was some of the stuff that she had to red line or red mark on your papers?
So with me, when it came to when I was writing there at the Clarion Ledger, I would like to be a little bit more descriptive starting off in my leads. And that's based off the
Mhm.
fact of where I was writing at before coming to the Clarion Ledger. So before the Clarion Ledger, I was strictly doing sports, writing for HBCU Game Day. So I was
Okay.
covering sports. So now I had to transition my mind back into news. And so I had not done hard news writing or anything like that from until my days, back into my days at WSB, which was like
Mhm.
a year and a half before getting to the Clarion Ledger. So she would say, for regular breaking news stories, Wilson, I just need you to get straight into it, like get straight to the point. Then there would be other times where they weren't necessarily feature stories, but there were stories that, like, okay, Wilton, I get that you want to be straightforward with the lead, but now you can be a little bit more creative. I need you to be a little bit more creative with this particular story. Or also the idea of when there aren't a lot of facts with a more general story, but it's interesting, how do you make it a story? You have to be specific and creative in how you craft the sentences, how you go in cross-referencing between adding information to the story to make it a story. So like really doing some, deeper dive reporting versus like, okay, here's something that was given to you in a press release. Okay, yeah, sometimes you're gonna write based off, some of the information that you have from the press release. Sometimes you're gonna get some information from the press release and still have to do some research. And so sometimes starting off, especially like within those first 6 to 8 months, it was a combination of everything. Some days, some weeks it would be heavy features. Some days it would be a lot of breaking news. And it just depends. And so you just never knew sometimes the way that she was thinking about things. And for me, it got to a point where I said, if I can kind of figure out how she's gonna, gauge, in terms of what she's looking for when I'm writing the story, the better off I'll be. But it got to a point that she would tell me, she would tell me, Wilton, I know you're trying to write the story based off how you think I'm going to edit. I remember the day she told me that.
Mm.
And I said, well, isn't that what I'm supposed to do? She said, no, you're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to write it the way that you're writing. And I'm going to always be an editor because every good writer, every great writer still needs an editor. There's never going to be a perfect lead sentence, a perfect story, especially on your first draft or even in your first couple of years of your career. Like it's going to always change. It's never going to be perfect. And in my mind, I never thought I would be perfect, but I wanted to get to a point to where, like, again, being around seasoned reporters that had like 10, 12, 12 years of experience on me, I'm like, I
Mhm.
want to get to the point where they are. But I had to realize like they had to go through the same process I did. I obviously didn't go to them and say, oh my God, I feel like I'm suffering or whatever, because it wasn't anything like that. But just knowing that you wanted to be successful, you wanted to put in the work, you wanted to grind to make sure your stories were top tier, like your counterparts. And so I just had to go through those times of her literally dissecting my entire story, thinking that like maybe I can't write, but only to realize that after I left, and I would go back and look at some of my stories. And once I started at Sports Illustrated, I could see what she was trying to tell me to do in terms of getting straight to the point. If it's a feature story, I need you to be a little bit more creative. I need you to be crafty. I might need you to add a little bit more to something that seems really basic to make it interesting so that, more than 10 people want to read it, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah. No, it makes all the sense in the world. So especially like if you start reacting to the way that she's doing the edits, of course you're gonna adjust the way you write because that's for the better. But it's funny that she said, no, you continue to write the way you write.
Right.
Let me do it. And I think that's super cool though.
Right.
So I'm gonna ask you just one last question before we go into the rapid fire round. What so with everything that you went through and you learned, what type of advice could you give to people that are trying to pursue sports journalism and just like your type of career path?
Man, listen, for those that want to go into sports journalism, I would say definitely get a hard news background. Like, don't just go into the idea of wanting to do sports and stick to sports. Like,
Mhm.
I think the best thing that my mentors always told me starting off, and I did it, but I didn't necessarily always understand it. They said the best news reporters make for the best sports reporters as opposed to starting straight in sports. And it wasn't until after having that news background from my days at WSB, from my days from undergrad versus, coming back into the clean ledger to where I'm at now, makes so much sense. Because a lot of days when you're looking at sports, it's not just about the games that's being played. You got players, nowadays getting in trouble with the law. Well, how does that look? Do you know how to read lawsuits? Do you know how to write breaking news stories when it comes to crime? If you've never done that, how can you do it with sports if you've never done it with news? You're talking about investigations. Investigations don't have anything to do with how many goals you scored on the soccer field, how many goals you got on a hockey rink, or how many home runs you hit on the baseball field. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with, depending on what the situation is, okay, how did you get caught in this situation? Who was involved in the situation? Where did it take place? Who are the other people involved in something that could be very, very, very messy? How do you go about finding sources? How do you know how to continue to dig and use your resources around you when it seems as though you don't have it? And if you don't have that experience, believe it or not, it can make your job real hard. But if you don't get it beforehand, when you get on the job, you will for sure get it. You will for sure get it. So I would definitely say invest in the news background starting off. And then also for me, knowing where I'm at now, I would have taken maybe 1 or 2 business classes when I was in undergrad to kind of understand a little bit more about the business side of sports. Because one thing that I'm knowing is that, it's a ton of people that want to do sports. A lot of people want to just focus on the games, but believe it or not, I'm starting to learn that there are a lot of other stories beyond just the games. Like, of course, you get those speeches where you get a chance to talk about, find out what people are doing in their lives, but then also what's some of the economic and financial impact of these decisions that athletes are making. For example, NIL has been huge this year.
Huge.
With college athletes, right? Mm-hmm. So being able to kind of break down and dissect how is this really impacting not only them, but the institutions that they're going to. How are these dollars going to, relatively impact recruiting efforts that's going into some of these Power 5 institutions? And what does this do for recruiting of these athletes coming into these schools in terms of like dollars and scholarships? Because at the end of the day, the advice of everything is a business, that's true. You could be the best player, best athlete, best anything, but it's still going to come down to dollars and cents at the end of the day, every single time. Every single time.
Every single time. That's what it's about. All about the Benjamins, baby.
Yep. And you couldn't have said it better. It's exactly all about the Benjamins. So between that, I wish I could have taken a few more business classes. I wish I would have gotten into I wish I would have gotten more involved in journalism, maybe like in the high school area, because I didn't get involved. So for me, the biggest transition for me in undergrad was when two things. When I actually started writing for like the campus paper and radio station and things like that my sophomore year, and then going into my junior year when I got involved with NABJ. When I got involved with NABJ, I started to see people that were doing the same exact things as me, if not working harder than me. And so knowing that, I'm thinking to myself, and I'm talking and having conversations with these people, they're like, yeah, I've been doing this since senior year of high school. Senior year of high school, I've been doing this. I've been at my student newspaper since freshman year. I'm thinking like, I'm behind, like I need to catch up. I've only been working for my radio station, my newspaper, the television station for maybe a year and a half, by that time going into my, my junior year or whatever. And so I think that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because I always look at that point as like the wake up call to kind of put a little heat up under me to say, okay, Wilton, at your undergrad institution, you may be doing all these things, but you got to step it up a little bit. Like, now what's out there for the people that's your age. Like, everybody's doing exactly what you're doing, or maybe even more. And so when I saw that, it just lit a fire under me to continue to go. Like, so I started my own blog, built the blog up, continue to write for, of course, the campus newspaper, the radio station, different things like that. Freelanced a ton, wrote for different blogs. And I did all that until I graduated from school, and did some more after I graduated. So I would definitely say, I wish I could have gotten more involved with it, maybe like in high school or like freshman year of college. And then also I wish I could have built more mentors other than my professors while I was in college, because when I got into the industry, I had a few people that I still look at as mentors. Basically, one of my biggest mentors helped me get my first job, well, my first real job at WSB. And so I remember thinking to myself, wonder if I would have had more mentors like him early in college, not just like, the professor that you took his or her class, or the people that you were freelancing for in that particular city, but like having some people to look at your work very early on and say, okay, Wilson, this is trash. Like, if you think this is good, this is trash. Like, this is
Right.
just not good. Like, you suck, and you just need to get better. Like, and essentially, as I got older and I was able to kind of understand that concept more, obviously I didn't really suck. Well, sometimes I really did suck looking back. But it's just the fact that it made me that much stronger. It gave me that hard outer shell to say, you know what, journalism is not easy, number one. But then two, being able to say, okay, I won't suck forever, because this is where I'm at now. I know I'm not going to stay at this point forever. I'm going to continue to grow, and I can only go up.
Facts. Right. That preach anywhere.
Yeah, for sure.
I appreciate it. Real quick before we go into the rapid fire, I know you do a podcast. I want to make sure you get a chance to plug that and talk about it real quick.
For sure. So the name of my podcast is the Red Diamond Report Podcast. So it brings out the intersection between sports, life, and basically I like to have different interviews with people that have very interesting stories and backgrounds, pretty much kind of similar to you. So in my very first season, man, I had different people on. I actually had one of my mentors on, who, when I was in college, I thought this guy knew everything. I thought he was I wouldn't necessarily say I thought he was the smartest person in the world, but as far as like advice, and he was also a big motivational speaker. He had been through one of the toughest times of his life. And I remember, that was during the time where I hadn't started working again after leaving the Clarion Ledger. And when he told me his story, I never knew he was going through these things. Because I mean, like, when we were in undergrad, like, he was doing everything, like doing motivational speaking in different cities, doing Toastmasters, like the national contest where they do a lot of speaking engagements and different things like that. Yeah. He was doing all of that. And so when he breaks down to tell me the different things he's been through since I've left undergrad, and just in his period, in the period of his life at that time, it was just remarkable to hear. And like, I felt like I had been through something similar to that, not exactly what he had been through, but just those times, and what it's like being in a place where you feel like you're never gonna come out. And so when he shared his story, and I shared his story with the world through the podcast, I got so many people to review that and listen to that. And they said that content that you created from his podcast was amazing. Like, don't change and make your podcast just a sports podcast, because I didn't want to do that. I didn't want to just talk, hey, LeBron James, although he's great, because he is great, or Kevin Durant, had 40 and 10 and 5 or whatever. But it's like, okay, that's great. We're going to talk about that for some episodes. But then in other episodes, I want to kind of dive in a little bit deeper on some people who really have some stories to tell that can really help us out in our daily struggles of life, because we all got different issues that we're dealing with. And I feel to be able to, use somebody else's story for motivation to help you in your own, I think that speaks volumes. And so that's what I try to do with the podcast. I try to bring on a combination of people that are heavy into sports, maybe former athletes, current athletes, then also people who have really unique stories that are willing to share to help and benefit someone else.
Amen to that. So I'm probably using the wrong term, but one of my favorite people I love to listen to, his name is Lawrence Holmes, over in Chicago, 670 The Score. Mm-hmm. And when he does his House of L podcast, he used the term like he calls it evergreen. I think it is, but pretty much, stuff that you just pick up and listen to no matter where you are. As like all the advice and all the stuff that people say, it lasts forever. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't change per se, but I think that's I love that type of content, and I love the platform. So I have to go pick up on that particular episode that you mentioned, and also some of the other episodes that you've done so far.
Absolutely. Like I said, you can find them on pretty much any platform: Apple, Spotify, Anchor, any major podcasting platform, you can find it. But those are the main three.
I got you. Well, now that I've already ran out of time, but I'm gonna go ahead and run through this rapid fire part. So it's the game within the game part where we ask, just have a little fun towards the end of the question. End of our interview. So our first question is, are you ready to play?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. All right, let's do this. All right. Chocolate chip cookies or oatmeal raisin?
Chocolate chip all day. That's my favorite. I don't hate oatmeal raisin because I like a good oatmeal raisin cookie every now and then. But chocolate chip, when they just sitting, you just got them out the oven. Oh man, like that they undefeated.
All right, you right about that. I have to. So I'm the oatmeal person on the podcast. My co-host Juwan, he's a chocolate chip. So if he was in here, he'd be tallying up right now. So
Yeah, chocolate chip. I mean, like I said, I could go either way, but if I have a choice, it's definitely chocolate chip.
that's fair. That's fair. All right, TV shows or movies?
Um, let's go for TV shows.
Okay. You got anyone in particular you're watching right now, or is one is like your all time favorite?
Not necessarily because now, I mean, I'll watch different ones, but I'm not super serious into one
Yeah.
right now. Currently, a lot of times, most of my TV when I'm watching TV is something sports related for sure, or news just in general, just to kind of keep up with everything going on in the world. But when I do get a chance to watch like shows that I enjoy, like it hasn't came back yet, but The Shy, oh man,
Mm.
like I love The Shy. Like this last season, like was ridiculous. I was just thinking to myself, do you watch The Shy?
I have not. So my brother's been telling me that I need to watch it.
You
So
need to watch it, but if you're gonna watch it, you have to start from the beginning. You
oh
have to.
yeah.
You have to start from the beginning. The Shy is good. I remember the first couple seasons of Manifest. Now the latter
Mm.
seasons of Manifest, I'm like, it got way out of hand. But if you do watch the latter season, make sure again watch the beginning so you can kind of get a good feel of what it all entails. But the classics that I like to watch, anytime I do get a chance to get like a random moment to catch an episode or something, Chris Martin, the Jamie Foxx show, Jamie Foxx, hands down, is hilarious. Like I
Right.
could be having a bad day watching the Jamie Foxx show and just fall out laughing. Like it's just like that, you know. Fresh Prince of Bel Air, that's one of my good shows. Family Matters, like there's nothing like Steve
Mm-hmm.
Urkel. Like you to see these were some of the shows I grew up on.
Same here.
You
We
know,
about the same age.
yeah. So it's just like to watch some of these shows, like when I do get a chance to watch it, I mean classics.
Oh yeah. Like the Martin, the Jamie Foxx, the Fresh Prince,
Oh
and
yeah.
even the Family Matters. And
Yes.
even I even throw in like Living Single, like all them shows,
I know it was one I hadn't mentioned. Living Single. I gotta get that one in.
and I can't think of the other show that came out before them.
In Living Color.
Oh, was it that one? Oh, I can't. I have to look it up later. But all them shows were just iconic to our culture and just iconic to the time that they came on. It's just
Thursday
legendary
night.
people. Yeah, like gold, gold
Yes,
standard TV right there.
absolutely.
All right, so let's go to the next question. All right, who's your top five in the NBA right now?
Woo, that's hard. But right now, I'm going to have to say KD, number one.
Mhm.
I'm gonna have to say I'm gonna have to include my guy. Even though they're not playing how I need them to play, I'm gonna probably include Jason Tatum in there. I'm
Okay.
gonna include him. Um, it's so tough. He started off really strong through like the first 2.5 weeks, and I'm not saying he's fell off, but just in terms of like as the season continues to go. But he's one of my up and coming players that I really, really enjoy watching play, and that's John Morant with the Grizzlies. I love John
I
Morant.
love Ja. I love Ja.
I
Ja's
love
is cold.
he is. He really, really is. And like I think as he continues to grow, because like if you really watch him when he first came in the league, he didn't have a jump shot like that. You know, he had the floater, he had the handles, he could dunk. But this season, oh, he's different. Like
Yeah.
he's extremely different. That's another player. Also, of course, Steph Curry. I mean, come on. Like Steph is like out of his mind balling right now. Steph, who else? So how many have I named? I said Katie.
Or
Okay, four.
Tatum,
Yeah, I said Tatum.
Ja,
Okay.
and Steph.
Give me D Book.
D book nice.
Yeah, let me
Nice
get
with it. D book nice with it. All right. I'm not bad at that top five. I respect it. Uh Tom Brady or Peyton Manning?
Ooh, that's so hard. And I always get into this debate with different people. in terms of overall, or just a final drive, or just in general?
Just in general.
Give me Tom Brady, even though I'm not the biggest Tom Brady fan. I respect his craft and I respect what he does. But as far as like just being the biggest fan, I'm not. But over the two of them, I'm gonna take Tom Brady.
Okay.
And that's hard though, because I can just remember as a kid, I'm sure you can, nobody could get to the line and change a play audible, rearrange the entire play, read the defense, and make a play like Peyton Manning. No one.
Piss me off all the time, especially especially as a Bears fan. Like, just
yeah. You're not a big fan of Peyton Manning during that time.
Nah, I mean, I still love him. It was always him, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady at the time. Like the goats that you kind of watched growing up.
Exactly.
All right. So if you could go pro in any other sport other than basketball, what would it be?
If I could go pro,
yeah,
any other sport other than basketball.
Yep. I gotta take away your first love.
Oh no, that's for sure. I totally understand it. Let's say we take away both. Let's say we take away basketball and football. If I could go pro in any other sport, it would probably be either soccer or baseball. Soccer or baseball. And honestly, it would probably be baseball because when I look at baseball, obviously it's one of the more, when I say diverse, not necessarily meaning African Americans, but just diverse in general. But to see more African American males getting into baseball, I tell my dad and I, we talk about this all the time. Imagine if there were more African Americans, like strongly African American males getting into baseball, how we get into basketball and football would change the whole landscape. And most people don't. And granted, baseball is a much harder sport to prepare for and really kind of go through the jumps in terms of like, from the NBA and the NFL. But if you put in the work to really get to that next level, you could make a difference, but it's just hard. But if I had the choice, if I couldn't go the NBA or NFL route, I would probably go the baseball route.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I played baseball for so long was because of the fact that it wasn't that many African Americans. I wanted to just play the game and be different. One of my loves other than basketball.
For sure.
All right. Favorite sports moment you have seen or witnessed?
In person or just in general?
In general.
My favorite sports moment that I've seen or witnessed. It's so many, man. Like, but I'll go back and take it to my childhood.
Okay.
When Allen Iverson made that crossover and made the shot and stepped over Tyronn Lue.
Yeah.
Classic. Like, I was thinking to myself, like, dude, I'm like 8 years old thinking like he really just did Tyronn Lue like that. Like, I mean, embarrassed him.
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite sports moments.
That's a great moment. Great moment in time history.
Yeah.
AI is one of those players I always wish, he got a ring. Definitely you go down on the greatest list of, greatest athletes to get a ring.
For sure. I mean, and look who he was playing against. Like, you talking about Kobe and Shaq in their primes.
That's tough.
It's hard to beat Kobe like that.
With the team that he had at the time, like absolutely. That team should never even been there. But that's that's a whole nother story.
It's true. That's a whole nother podcast right there.
For real. All right. So if you could be a hype man for any artist, who would it be?
Hype man for any artist. A younger me would have said T.I. A me now would probably say Lil Baby. Okay.
That's good.
Yeah.
I dig that. All right. So you get a chance to take over any organization, and this could be any organization. It could be Chase Bank, because you want all their money. You can go take over Jerry World, and go take over the Dallas Cowboys. But you get just the opportunity to take over any organization. Who do you choose?
Who would I choose? honestly, regardless of all the organizations, even like, the flashing lights of LA and New York and places like that, I grew up a Saints fan. So to be able to say, hey, I'm gonna go and take over the Saints, obviously Drew Brees is not playing there anymore, but I get a chance to talk to Drew Brees if they say, hey, Drew, like what should I do? How do I get to find another guy like you at quarterback?
Yeah.
Because I'm not really sure Jameis is gonna get the job done. I'm
Yeah.
not really confident in Taysom Hill, and I'm not really confident in Simeon or whatever. So it's like, how can I find another you? And I say that in a joking way, of course, but honestly, to be able to take over a franchise like that went through everything it went through post Katrina, and even just the years after that. I mean, obviously, Drew Brees changed the whole landscape. Obviously bringing the Super Bowl to New Orleans, and the whole idea of New Orleans Saints football. Because before that, you're talking about as a kid, 79, 79, 79, thinking you're going to the playoffs, 79. Aaron Brooks getting to the final goal drive or whatever, and it's like, yeah, we're still not going to the playoffs, 79. I'm like, I can't deal with this. So believe it or not, when they brought in Drew Brees, and I actually like Aaron Brooks. I like the way he played the game. I like the way I liked everything that he brought to New Orleans. But when Drew Brees came and really changed the game, he changed the game. And I think my love for the Saints, although they were going, constant seasons of 79, 8, and 8, it just continued to grow when Drew Brees came.
It did. So my father, I didn't mention this to you, but so my father is a Saints fan. He grew up in the South. He went
Okay.
to he went to Southern. A lot of my family went to Southern University. So
Okay.
but yeah, he's a big Saints fan. My father's from Monroe, Louisiana, so it's a little
Okay.
small little town
Yep.
down
North
there.
Louisiana.
Yeah.
Yep.
So and then I actually got a cousin of mine that's at Xavier University down there or
In
something.
New Orleans.
So
Yep.
yep. So she's down there too. So yeah, so a lot of my family's Southern, HBCU, Jackson, Grambling, all
Yep.
them all them down there. But he's the biggest Saints fan, so I was happy that he was able to kind of see them win one while he's still here, get a chance to win.
Exactly.
Uh, he loves the Saints. He loves that Who Dat Nation. The whole family. That's the whole family. Like anytime they playing the Dallas Cowboys too, they
Oh
give one
yeah.
of my cousins. They give one of my cousins the hardest time in the world.
Exactly. Saints and Cowboys fans do not like each other. Like you will not. You
Hmm.
can't even sit by a Cowboys fan when they're playing each other.
Oh,
It's
you
bad.
can't. It's a wrap.
Yeah, it is. It's bad.
It's definitely right. All right. So the hardest question of all, but could be the easiest. How can people follow you and keep up with your career with everything that you got going on?
Man, that's actually a great question. So people can follow me on Twitter at Wilton Reports. They can also follow me on Instagram at Wilton Reports _. On Facebook, it's just Wilton Jackson. And then I have a website. It's wiltonjackson.com. I post different stories that I do, whether it's when I start my podcast back, I'll be posting podcast episodes there. Also, I have a brand, which I don't know if you got a chance to read it. It's called Inspired Dream. Yep.
Yeah.
And basically I have like hoodies and t-shirts and stuff like that. And I'm actually getting ready to release a new line of items coming up here in the next maybe 2.5 to 3 weeks. And so the name of the brand, I don't know if you can see it fully, is Inspired a Dream. So it's a DREAM. And so D stands for driven, R stands for resilient, E stands for empowerment, A stands for ambition, and M stands for motivation. And I came up with this brand or this idea for the brand when I was finishing graduate school.
That's dope. See, I wanted to ask about the hoodie, but I'm like, I got limited amount of time.
Oh no,
Do I
it's
ask about the hoodie? Do I
yeah.
don't ask about the hoodie? But yeah, that's dope. I definitely want one, by the way. So
Okay,
once
I can send you one.
that I gotta get one. Cause I was like, yo, that's a dope hoodie.
Yeah, I
I'm like,
appreciate
yeah, I was looking at him like, yo, he probably made that. I'm pretty sure he did. But
yeah, I did. I definitely did.
that's dope. All right. For all the listeners and fans, subscribers out there, go ahead, continue to follow this man, follow his career, but also continue to follow us, like, retweet, share, and subscribe. So you can find us on YouTube at Capturing the Game podcast. Also on Facebook, it's Capturing the Game podcast. On Instagram, it's capturing _ the _ game _ pod. On Twitter, it's just CTG podcast. So I mean, that's a wrap, man. So Wilson, man, thank you for coming on. Thank you for being part of the show, man, and hanging out, man. It's dope to learn about you, man, and get insights on your career and everything you got going on going forward.
It's no problem, man. Thank you for having me.